Hotline Miami is my favorite indie game of all time, and not just that, it also is one of my favorite games in general. Hotline Miami 2 was released not too long ago, and I bought it the day it came out, and my excitement couldn't wait. Now that I've sat through pretty much all the game has to offer, beaten the story, I thought I'd come here and tell you what came of it. I actually was planning to come to this video, talk about the parts of the game that were flawed and the parts that were well done, mention the story, characters, gameplay, the usual, finish it up nice and quick. But that was before I actually played the game, and looking back on it, I never would have thought this game would give me so much stuff to talk about. So without further ado, let's get right into this. Hotline Miami 2 suffers from many issues that the previous game didn't. But before I go into that, I think I should talk about what Hotline Miami was going for and why it was such a success. Hotline Miami is a game that excels at simplicity. Its design is simple, combat is simple, story is simple, everything is simple, everything is low-key. But the reason it's such a great game is because these simple aspects of the game are interesting. It's a very straightforward game, but at the same time, a very enjoyable game. I usually try to pepper in a plot description, but it's not really necessary for Hotline Miami. You play as the silent protagonist Jacket, he gets phone calls telling him to go places, you go places, and kill everyone. Done. Of course, there's more to the story to that, but I'll get into that later. Hotline Miami has two character focuses, Jacket and Biker. Here's my first issue with Hotline Miami 2, a lack of focus and many side characters and stories. There are a total of 9 playable characters, 12 if we count each of the fans as individual characters, and of these characters I'd say there's about 5 different story focuses. Hotline Miami had 2 characters and 1 story focus. A Hotline Miami story doesn't need to be packed with content, and it most certainly doesn't need to be filled with characters. Most characters only serve to divert attention from the central plot, which I would argue is the feud between the fans and the Russian mob. I think the detective, the director, and Jake should have been omitted. The side stories involving Richter and Evan and the flashbacks involving Beard are actually interesting and they serve a purpose. Evan's research into the events in Hotline Miami could serve as an interesting subplot, while Beard's flashbacks can serve to tie up loose ends and explain things about the first game that were left ambiguous. One other thing to mention about the story is that it really does play with your expectations, which is something I love, so that's a plus. I was surprised to see the fans get killed off so quick, but I think there's a reason for that, and I'll get into that later. I'd also like to praise the story for its ability to tie up all the loose ends from Hotline Miami, explaining little details like the Polaroid image that Jacket throws at the end of the first game, also the game's remarkable ability to make the most subtle of connections and references to the first game, like how the director lived in, if not the same apartment as Jacket, at least the same apartment complex or chain, or Jake's death scene happening in a room identical to the one you find his corpse in Hotline Miami, or Biker protesting at Jacket's court hearings. It was these little things that really made the story enjoyable for me, and each time I played through it was like a game of I spy and interpret with my little eye and brain. And lastly, the story's ability to be an emotional roller coaster. I will never know how you managed to pull this off, Genaton, but you really made me care for these characters despite the fact that they're all essentially psychopaths who get a sick thrill out of murder. Specifically the fans and the people from Hotline Miami like Jacket, Beard, and Richter. And oh damn, that ending. Not gonna spoil anything, but that ending, man. Story's good and I appreciate the little things, but it has a lack of focus. Now we can get into the gameplay, and boy do I have a lot to say about the gameplay. Holy shit. The first and most noticeable thing is the level design. Hotline Miami 2 has giant levels in comparison to 1, and they're much more open-ended. They're rife with windows, guns, and off-screen enemies, and this is what I think the central problem of Wrong Number's gameplay is. There's this general feeling I get of moving slow when I play Wrong Number, like cautious play is necessary, where in Hotline Miami you could get a knife and basically plow through an entire level in less than a minute. It's that speed and power that made you feel like such a god in Hotline Miami. I'm not going to say Hotline Miami is meant for speedruns, but I can definitely see the game appealing to speedrunners. I can't say the same for Wrong Number. There's a much larger emphasis on guns with the larger levels, and with the guns comes slower, more tedious, cautious play. You have to sit behind cover and observe your surroundings before going in. You need to be prepared. You need to make sure there aren't any enemies off screen that can off you while you're trying to kill everyone. In Hotline Miami, this wasn't the case though. Buildings were much more densely packed, and the gameplay put a huge emphasis on melee fighting. It discouraged using guns since they were loud. And while you had an advantage on enemies because of tight spaces, they also had an advantage on you for the same exact reason. The only levels in Hotline Miami 1 that put an emphasis on firearms were either boring or cheap as fuck. I'm looking at you, Clean Hit and Assault, you fucking pieces of shit. And it's this element of level design that made Hotline Miami such a blast to play through. You could cross a building and clear it in a matter of seconds. Whereas in Wrong Number, you have to slowly take your time, making sure not to get shot, taking cover when necessary. Hotline Miami rewarded reckless gameplay, the kind where you run in without a care. Wrong Number seems to be more interested in keeping the player scared of what's ahead and cautious of what's to come, which is a cruel misunderstanding of what Hotline Miami's mechanics are built for. And this, in turn, slows down the entire game, and you don't get that feeling of satisfaction when you run through a level and massacre everyone in a matter of seconds. It's also because of this level design, Wrong Number opens the door for cheap death after cheap death after cheap death. Hotline Miami is a game that very much relied on the mechanical skill of the player. The reason the gameplay was so satisfying was because it was all on you, as the player, running through the building and slashing everyone to bits. You won because you were thinking quick on your feet, fast reflexes, and split-second decisions. And while Wrong Number still has this element of play in it, it's done to a much lesser extent. You die a lot more from off-screen enemies with guns, you die from enemies behind windows, also off-screen most of the time, you die from mobs of 5 or more enemies all armed with firearms. And what the fuck is this shit? Most deaths don't feel as though they're the fault of the player, rather they're the fault of the level design and enemy placement, but like I said, this game does have good levels reminiscent of Hotline Miami, and they're lots of fun to play, but these levels are far apart and there aren't that many of them overall. Starting a level and going into a building in Hotline Miami gave you instant visual confirmation. You knew where everyone was, what their paths were, and the layout of the building. All you had to do now was decide in which order you should start killing them. While in Wrong Number, you have to sit behind cover and observe the surroundings, using shift look and hope that the guy across the map doesn't shoot you, and it's a crapshoot of whether that'll happen anyways if the enemy has a set path, because if you're not observing his movement at all times, you won't know when he's in range of you. The cheap deaths of Wrong Number also hurt its longevity. I could play a level of Hotline Miami and die 100 times and I'd still be trucking along trying to win. I quit much more frequently when I play Wrong Number, and I get angry much quicker, because I feel like the game is actively working against me. While in Hotline Miami, the game was set up against me, but it never had the upper hand. It was never unfair. In fact, the level design affects the game so deeply, one of the cheapest masks in Hotline Miami has basically become unusable in Wrong Number. Now would be a good time to talk about art and music, since I'm not good at segueing into a new topic. Wrong Number has a better soundtrack, hands down. It has a total of 49 tracks and each one sounds fucking fantastic. I can't really pick one out that sounds bad. I really love the way Wrong Number uses its music to cap a climatic moment in a level, whipping out a chilled tune after a brutal beatdown with the thumping synth tracks. A few examples of this would be tracks like She Meditates, Dust, and Blizzard. It has this amazing ability to calm you right after a heart-pounding level of brutal carnage. As for the art, it looks similar, but it's definitely a lot better with small improvements. I don't really have anything to complain about, except Richard. I get that this is a small gripe, but come on guys, why did you make Richard's face sprite mouth move? He's supposed to be a mask. I get that that's probably what makes it creepy, the fact that it's a mask and it can move its mouth like a human. But still, his mouth didn't move in the first game. Plus, I think having his mouth still would make it even more strange, since everyone talks with their mouths. I think it'd be creepy to see something, or someone, I guess, talk without moving its mouth. So here I am, feeling somewhat dejected. Wrong Number seems to excel in every way imaginable except the one way that counts, the gameplay. I kept thinking to myself, why did the level design, and in turn gameplay, change so drastically? Then I found something interesting. That gave me some insight into why this might be the case. It comes back to the fans. Dennis Whedon said the fans symbolized the actual fans, the fans of the first game. The people who wanted Hotline Miami 2 to be the same as the first game. And I don't think it was coincidental that the fans were killed off so early. I feel like it's the devs' way of telling those people to fuck off and that they were going to make the game they wanted to make. This was going to be Hotline Miami 2, not Hotline Miami 1.5. And you know what? Maybe that's the point. I'm not going to take back what I said about the gameplay. It really is a downgrade from the first game, but maybe that's the point. Maybe Jonathan and Dennis wanted to make something different, something to deviate from the Hotline Miami experience, and you know what? Even though they struck out in terms of gameplay, I have to respect their artistic vision and their integrity. I'd much rather have a developer try something new and strike out than just copy what's already been proven to work. Fucking Far Cry 4. Plus, with the soon-to-come level editor, which I know I'll be spending hundreds of hours in, I'm sure there will be plenty of new levels more akin to the designs of the original game, and plenty of extra content for us to sink our teeth into. Who knows, I might even get to making a video about the level editor. So Denaton, thank you. It was a great game, and I want you guys to know you have a dedicated customer who's going to be excited for anything you guys decide to make. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go play some Hotline Miami.